Prabhu Lokena. Prabhu My dear Lord Chaitanya, please be merciful to me. This has to be louder. Because who can be more merciful than your Lordship within these three worlds? Your incarnation is just to reclaim the conditioned fallen souls, but I assure you that you will not find a greater fallen soul than me. Therefore, my claim is first. My dear Lord Nityananda, you are always joyful in spiritual bliss. Since you always appear very happy, I have come to you because I am most unhappy. If you kindly put your glance over me, then I may also become happy. My dear Advaita Prabhu, husband of Sita, you are so kind. Please be merciful to me. If you are kind to me, naturally, Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda will also be kind to me. O Swarup Damodar, personal secretary of Lord Chaitanya, O six Goswamis, O Sri Rupa, Sanatan, Raghunath Bhatta, Gopal Bhatta, and Sri Jiva Goswami and Raghunath Das Goswami, O Lokanath Goswami, my beloved spiritual master. Narottam Das also prays for your mercy. O Srinivasacharya, successor to the six Goswamis, please be merciful to me. Narottam Das always desires the company of Ramachandra Chakravarti. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prastaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane, Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pacharane, Nirvishesha Sunyavadi, Askita Desha Tani. We're reading from the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, chapter entitled The Spiritual Master, beginning with verse number 48.
48 and 49 are both.
Naivo Bayanti Apichitam Kavayas Tabesha Ramas Suya Sapi Kritam Rida Mudha Smaranta Yonantar Bahistanu Ritam Asubam.
Did your dad live at home with you?
Turn it off, please.
No. Kendra lived in a condo in an open circle.
Must we? Do we all have phones? We could like look on our thing. I don't want to have to hear YouTube ads. That's it, forget it, skip it. I'm just gonna read it. We're not gonna chant responsively. Just turn it off. I have a lot I wanna do and a little time to do it, and I don't have time for this. Turn it off.
We'll try to get it while you're reading, just, you can continue reading. We'll read along with you.
Acharya Chaitya Vapusa Svakatim Vyantis. Vyanakti. O my Lord, transcendental poets and experts in transcendental science could not fully express their indebtedness to you, even if they were endowed with a prolonged lifetime of Rama. For you appear in two features, externally as the Acharya and internally as the Supersoul, to deliver the embodied living being by directing him how to come to you. Report this verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 29th chapter, 6th verse, was spoken by Sri Uddhava after he heard from Sri Krishna all necessary instructions about yoga. Verse 49. Tesham satata yutanam bhajatam pratipurvakam gadami bhuti yogantam yena mam upriyanti te. Everyone knows this verse, so we can say it together. Tesham satata yutanam bhajatam pratipurvakam gadami bhuti yogantam yena mam upriyanti te. Tesham, unto them. Satata yutanam, always engaged. Bhajatam, rendering devotional service. Priti Purvakam,
in loving
ecstasy. Dadami, I give. Bhuti Yoga, real intelligence. Tam, that. Yena, by which. Mam, unto me. Upayanti, come. They. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give them the understanding by which they can come to me. Ishi Maha Ki Jai. Report by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. So, when the Chaitanya Charitamrita quotes in due course many verses from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, we have the opportunity, as Srila Prabhupada desires, to have another purport to the same verse that he had already done, first in Bhagavad Gita, in Chaitanya, and Srimad Bhagavatam in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. This verse from the Bhagavad Gita, 10th chapter, 10th verse, clearly states how Govinda Dev instructs his bona fide devotee. So it's established in this chapter how Govinda, who is the speaker of Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, is the instructing spiritual master. So it's nice, Prabhupada immediately says, the Lord declares that by enlightenment and theistic knowledge, he awards attachment for him to those who constantly engage in his transcendental loving service. This awakening of divine consciousness enthralls a devotee who thus relishes his eternal transcendental mellow. Such an awakening is awarded only to those convinced by devotional service about the transcendental nature of the personality of Godhead. They know that the supreme truth, the all-spiritual and all-powerful person, is one without a second and has fully transcendental senses. He is the fountainhead of all emanations, Such pure devotees, always merged in knowledge of Krishna and absorbed in Krishna consciousness, exchange thoughts and realizations as great scientists exchange their views and discuss the results of their research in scientific academies. Such exchanges of thoughts in regard to Krishna give pleasure to the Lord, who therefore favors such devotees with all enlightenments. Shri Radha Krishna Vedanta Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhavitamscha He Krishna Purana Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Kamoskate Jayatam Surto Pangor Mama Mandama Tergati Matsar Vasva Padam Bojo Radha Madhava Mohano Divya Bindaranya Kalpajumada Shri Mahatangara Singha Sanasto Radha Shubhu Vidyadevo Pestalvi Sevyamana Smarmani Shriman Rasarasarali Vamsi Matistata Tatastitaha Karshan Venu Svanar Gopir Gopinatha Shri Vestina Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhana Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vajtapaturviyas Chakra Vasudhuvi Chakti Dana Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasani Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Desham Satata Yukta Nam Bhajatam to those who are constantly devoted to worshiping me with love, I give them the understanding by which they can come to me. So Prabhupada is re-stressing the point that is just starting now.
It's been started.
Now
The audio wasn't working
up until now.
it was faulty.
Okay. So, it's an important verse from the Bhagavad Gita. Indeed, it's one of the, as so titled or pointed out to us by Srila Prabhupada, 4 seed verses of the Bhagavad Gita, verses chapter 10, 8 through 11. I am the source of all material and spiritual worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who know this perfectly worship me with all their hearts. Machitamad prana bodhayantas parasparam katayanchas tumam nityam tushyanti cha ramanti cha. The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me, their lives are surrendered unto me, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss in enlightening one another and conversing about me. That's the previous verse to this verse number 10. So we can see how Srila Prabhupada is taking that direction or cue from the Lord himself. They take great transcendental pleasure in enlightening one another and conversing about me. The Lord declares that by enlightenment in theistic knowledge, theistic, to the degree that one has faith in Krishna, To that degree, it is understood that one is a knowledgeable person. And Srila Prabhupada would give the example of his own self. I am nothing extraordinary, but I have not any type of great scholar, but I had cent% faith in my spiritual master. And because of that, the Lord awarded him everything. We rediscovered Srila Prabhupada's letter in December, Christmas time, 22nd, 1972, to Sudam, where he is describing the miracle that occurred of his coming here to New York City. And in his own words, who could imagine an old man just selling some books, barely enough just to get eatables? What to speak of surviving, but can start a worldwide movement to save humanity. Now I can see that this was Krishna's miracle. He awards attachment for him to those who constantly engage in his transcendental loving service. So there was never a time, Srila Prabhupada said, when I was forgetful of Krishna, and then upon meeting his spiritual master, who he only had the physical darshan of just on a handful of times, that I never felt alone from my spiritual master. He was always with me. Srila Prabhupada was criticized by his godbrothers one time coming to Mayapur that he didn't stop first and pay his respects at the samadhi of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, which was on what was legally and practically considered the fountainhead place of the entire Gaudiya Math, Sri Chaitanya Math, the original temple built there where Gorkishore Das Babaji's Samadhi and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's Samadhi is. And Prabhupada remarked to this criticism, do they think that I have to make a physical show of nearness to my spiritual master to prove my allegiance and devotion to him? So constantly engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord through his beloved spiritual master, this awakening of divine consciousness enthralls a devotee who thus relishes his transcendental mellow. So, Srila Prabhupada said, I'm simply presenting everything I've learned from my spiritual master. Indeed, that was the last instruction, which was solidifying the very first instruction. You were an intelligent young man. Why don't you teach, preach Lord Chaitanya's message all over the world? I think that you should turn yourself into a very good English preacher and impress the novel instructions of Lord Chaitanya upon those who are not conversant with the language of the present members. This will do good for you and for those who will help you. So, Prabhupada learned how exalted is the actual position of complete self-realization, ultimately entering into the transcendental loving service of Krishna, Radha and Krishna, Krishna and Balaram in Goloka Vrindavan, and was very careful, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada, very careful to present these exalted topics in a way that presented these topics in such a way, making it clear that such things could not be achieved cheaply or by any type of imagination motivated by any type of egoistic or bodily conception of life in this world or any other world within this universe. So the actual position of self-realization is described here, constantly devoted. So I think I said what I'd been familiar with, constantly devoted to worshiping me with love. Here it's saying to serving me with love. These are one and the same things. The practical activity of spreading Krishna consciousness in this world, especially in this very bleak and dangerous time, Kali Yuga, is the number one activity of devotees of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. And Srila Prabhupada is the most perfect example of one so constantly engaged. And the attitude or prerogative of such a great saintly person is one of immense compassion, an ocean of transcendental mercy for all the fallen conditioned souls. And Srila Prabhupada demonstrated complete satisfaction in that engagement, and he passed on that satisfaction to his disciples, to his followers, to those who will take up his mission and take up the practical activity. The complete satisfaction that everything is there within that is automatically understood. Such an awakening is awarded only to those convinced by devotional service about the transcendental nature of the personality of Godhead. As one cannot separate the life from one's body, one cannot separate the order of the spiritual master from one's life and soul. They know that the supreme truth, the all-spiritual and all-powerful person, is one without a second and has fully transcendental senses. For one who is actually engaged in the Lord's service, meeting people who are not engaged in devotional service is not at all a disadvantage. He gives them the opportunity to have their association so that they may become devotees of the Lord one day. Such pure devotees, always merged in knowledge of Krishna and absorbed in Krishna consciousness, exchange thoughts and realizations as great scientists exchange their views and discuss the results of their research in scientific academies. Srila Prabhupada was very, very eager to hear of all advances in Krishna consciousness, opening temples, going to unlikely or difficult places, even taking risks. Prabhupada was challenged in Bombay by one atheistic Arya Samajist. Why are you, this is India, it's almost like you're preaching to the choir. Why don't you go to Pakistan, and preach there? And Prabhupada said, you are challenging us? Yes, I challenge you. We will go. And he called Brahmananda and his younger brother Gargamuni, Swamis at the time, to go to West Pakistan, Brahmananda, and Gargamuni, East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh. And it was extremely difficult to practically impossible, and also the Bangladesh war was starting, and there was even a false, fake news, that word these days, report, 4 Hare Krishna missionaries shot. And Prabhupada was in so much anxiety, and somehow a communication was able to be sent from Brahmananda. It's very difficult here. Can I get out of here? And immediately Prabhupada was relieved that Brahmananda was alive. And then when he finally made it to Bombay, Prabhupada just immediately got up and embraced him and just started rubbing him all over his body, just a mother, like a child who might have had an accident, to make sure every limb of the body is okay, nothing's broken. And it was very rare that Prabhupada would use his body, his physical touching like that. Gargamuni also, similar experience. Devotees who had that opportunity of being physically touched by Srila Prabhupada remarked that was the most ecstatic experience of their entire life. Madhu Dwees Prabhu, who put on the epic 1970 San Francisco Rath Yatra, crouching at the car, and Prabhupada, the car doors open, and he crouched down. Prabhupada, how did you like the festival? And Prabhupada just rubbed him up and down his back, just said, I loved it. And this was just so ecstatic that one of Madhu Dwees Prabhu's godbrothers, what was his name? He's passed away some years, but there's a video of him on his departure bed describing this story, him just witnessing this, and he was just moved to tears to see that. There's a memory of Kaushalya Devi Dasi, who met Prabhupada as a 16-year-old hippie in 1968 in Hawaii, who, anyway, a very personal story. She came to Krishna consciousness ultimately in Los Angeles and joined, and she was chosen to be one of the World Sankirtan party devotees, the first devotees to go to India. So she's only 18 years old, but she had memorized the Sri Upanishad. So in a village outside of Surat, where arguably the devotees were received in the most amazing way, he asked Kaushalya to stand up and read the entire Sri Upanishad by memory. And Prabhupada was very, very pleased, beaming just like a proud father. All the people were amazed to see a Western young woman chanting their Sri Upanishad, and Prabhupada called her up, and she bowed down, and she just rubbed the back of her head and her up and down her back, just like a young daughter. So the relationship with such a personality as Srila Prabhupada, based on preaching. Similarly, His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami, at the time Ganesham Prabhu, he immediately, from the time that he joined, showed extraordinary abilities and devotional tendencies. So he practically, risking his life, going to Soviet communist-controlled countries, some of them also not even just Soviet, but also Muslim countries, and in a black body too, but completely on the transcendental platform. Prabhupada was so pleased with him, and it was one of the most emotional experiences in Prabhupada's last days and weeks to meet with him and to hear of his preaching activities. So tomorrow marks the 57th anniversary of the first actually very successful Harinam Sankirtan in the Western world at Tompkins Square Park, October 9th, 1966, which was a Sunday, October 9th, 2023, is a Monday, and I looked up the TT, and it's actually the next day, Tuesday, the 10th, this year. Just like this year, we had Purushottam Adhika Mas in the summer, and now everything is pushed up, starting very late. Similarly, that year, 1966, there had just been a Purushottam Adhika Mas, and Kartik that year started even one day later than it will start this year. Interesting. So let us look at a description. I can't read the whole thing. His Holiness Satsvarup Maharaj, who was a personal participant, wrote a very lengthy and vividly described description of this kirtan this day. So we'll see how much we can repeat here. Speak up loud.
Yeah, I was thinking of reading it at Tompkins Square Park on the night. I usually do that every year in the evening after the
Oh, really? Okay. So we're all going to go out there tomorrow. It's going to be colder. It's going to be the high will be like, the temperature will be between like 58 and 63 degrees. Which if I told you that in January, you'd be rejoicing. But if I tell you that now, you'd be like, oh. October 1966. Tompkins Square Park was the park on the Lower East Side. On the south, it was bordered by 7th Street with its 4- and 5-storied brownstone tenements. That's where Adi Prush serves out his food for life, 7th Street. And, well, actually, it's on Avenue A. On the north side was 10th, with more brownstones, but in better condition, in the very old small building that housed the Tompkins Square Park branch of the New York Public Library. On Avenue B, the park's east border, stood St. Brigid's Church, built in 1848 when the neighborhood had been entirely Irish. The church, school, and rectory still occupied much of the block. They just underwent a big renovation in the last 10 or 15 years, but it's still there, the entire complex and property. And the west border of the park, Avenue A, was lined with tiny old candy stores selling newspapers, magazines, cigarettes, and egg cream sodas at the counter. There's still one store, I forget the guy's name, he's in his 90s, but he's been selling like his own homemade kind of milkshakes there for like 65 years, right across the street. So he was there when this happened. There were also a few bars, several grocery stores, and a couple of Slavic restaurants specializing in inexpensive vegetable broth, which brought Ukrainians and hippies side by side for bodily nourishment. Charming, right? The park's 10 acres held many tall trees, but at least half the park was paved. A network of 5-foot-high, heavy wrought iron fences weaved through the park, lining the walkways and protecting the grass. The fences and the many walkways and entrances to the park gave it the effect of a maze. Since the weather was still warm and it was Sunday, the park was crowded with people. Almost all the space on the benches was lined and the walkways, all the space on the benches that lined the walkways was occupied. There were old people, many Ukrainians. And still to date, it's called Ukrainian Village by 2nd Avenue. This new Ukrainian Credit Union Bank on 2nd Avenue, a few blocks north. And there's the Ukrainian Museum there on 7th Street. Almost all the spaces on, Ukrainians dressed in outdated suits and sweaters, even in the warm weather, sitting together in clans talking. There were many children in the park also, mostly Puerto Ricans and blacks, but also fair-haired, hard-faced slum kids racing around on bikes or playing with balls and frisbees. Over the years doing the Harinam, at the time I was staying in the Bhakti Center, I would regularly take a walk in East River Park, which has now been bulldozed because of climate change, and they tore the whole place up to, anyway. So at that time, I was going there and walking over the 10th Street footbridge. They have these like New York City housing projects, these kind of tenement buildings, and there was one fellow, my age. He was in a wheelchair and had a Puerto Rican flag flying on it, motorized wheelchair, and he called me over, Hare Krishna, and we got to talking, and he revealed to me that he was a 7-year-old kid riding his bike in Tompkins Square Park when this kirtan happened. So here he's being described here. Hard-faced slum kids racing around on bikes or playing with balls and frisbees. The basketball and handball courts were mostly taken by the teenagers, and as always, this was before there were leash laws, there were plenty of loose running dogs, and also pick up your poop. That wasn't, so you can imagine New York smelled a lot different back then than it does now. A marble miniature gazebo, still there, 4 pillars and a roof with a drinking fountain inside, was a remnant from the old days, 1891. It was the temperance movement, which actually got them to pass, what is that, the 18th Amendment, forbidding alcohol consumption. Lasted about 10 or 12 years. Gave rise to organized crime and the mafia. With a remnant from the old days, 1891, according to the inscription, on its 4 sides were the words hope, faith, charity, and temperance. But someone had sprayed the whole structure with black paint, making crude designs and illegible names and initials. Today, a bench had been taken over by several conga and bongo drummers, and the whole park pulsed with their demanding rhythms. And the hippies were there, different from the others. The bearded bohemian men and their long-haired young girlfriends, dressed in old blue jeans, were still an unusual sight. Even in the Lower East Side melting pot, their presence created tension. They were from middle-class families, so they had not been driven to the slums by dire economic necessity. This created conflicts in their dealings with the underprivileged immigrants, and the hippies' well-known proclivity for psychedelic drugs, their revolt against their families and affluence, and their absorption in the avant-garde sometimes made them the jeered minority among their neighbors. But the hippies just wanted to do their own thing and create their own revolution for love and peace, so usually they were tolerated, although not appreciated. There were various groups among the young and hip at Tompkins Square Park. There were friends who had gone to the same school together, who took the same drug together, or agreed on a particular philosophy of art, literature, politics, or metaphysics. There were lovers. There were groups hanging out together for reasons undecipherable except for the common purpose of doing their own thing. And there were others who lived like hermits. A loner would sit on a park bench analyzing the effects of cocaine, looking up at the strangely rustling green leaves of the trees and blue sky above the tenements, and then down to the garbage at his feet. As he helplessly followed his mind from fear to illumination, to disgust to hallucination, and on, till after a few hours the drug began to wear off and he was again a common stranger. Sometimes they would sit up all night, spaced out in the park, until at last, in the light of morning, they would stretch out on benches to sleep. So we'll skip a little bit. Into this chaotic... okay, no. It's all so good, it's hard to omit anything. But whatever the hippies' diverse interests and drives, the Lower East Side was an essential part of the mystique. Still, the East Village, and actually they gave an extra geographical description to this area, Alphabet City, continues to be a magnet for young people. It was not just a dirty slum. Now it's one of the most expensive places to live in the whole city. You know, of course, excluding the Upper East and Upper West Sides, but just to live in a 400 or 500 square foot studio apartment box, you have to pay like $3,000 a month. It was the best place in the world to conduct the experiment in consciousness, for all its filth and threat of violence and the confined life of its brownstone tenements. The Lower East Side was still the forefront of the revolution in mind expansion. Unless you were living there and taking psychedelics or marijuana, or at least intellectually pursuing the quest for free personal religion, you weren't enlightened, and you weren't taking part in the most progressive evolution of human consciousness. And it was this searching, a quest beyond the humdrum existence of the ordinary materialistic, quote, straight, unquote, American, that brought unity to the otherwise eclectic gathering of hippies on the Lower East Side. So Srila Prabhupada's coming, such a pure devotee of such an exalted caliber, there's the saying, a rising tide in a harbor raises all boats, bringing out this very rarely manifested interest in higher spiritual topics. You look at the subsequent generations from this time, much more materialistic in what is their interest. And the ability to actually want to speak of desire, higher consciousness, higher enlightenment, and what to speak of having the sincerity to take risks to pursue that, it's practically gone. So Srila Prabhupada, everything was readied and prepared for Srila Prabhupada coming. Like Prabhupada said in that letter, that all along Krishna was preparing something that I could not see, to bring all of you very sincere American boys and girls to come forward, to come to me, to be trained in doing the work of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Bhakti would be translated by the non-devotee Indian so-called gurus and translators as divine love. There was one Indian Swami said to our Srila Prabhupada, "Swami, I love you." And Prabhupada said, "Yes, I love you too, but not this skin love." That bhakti is translated as devotional service. Into this chaotic pageant, Swamiji entered with his followers and sat down to hold kirtan. 3 or 4 devotees who arrived ahead of him selected an open area of the park, put out an oriental carpet Robert Nelson had donated. He later became initiated as Jagannath Prasad, and he was a member. He wasn't living here, but when we first moved in here, he was here as one of the crew, more or less, in the early and mid-1980s. He's passed away a good number of years now. Robert Nelson, and began playing kartals and chanting Hare Krishna. Immediately, some boys rode up on their bicycles, breaking just short of the carpet, and stood astride their bikes, curiously and irreverently staring. Other passerbys gathered to listen. Meanwhile, Swamiji, accompanied by a half a dozen disciples, was walking the 8 blocks from the storefront. So the route which is taken, if you want to follow in the footsteps, you go out of 26 2nd Avenue, make sure you lock the door behind you, make a right and walk all the way up to 7th Street, and then make another right and walk from 2nd Avenue to 1st Avenue to Avenue A and enter the park from its southwest border and come to the Hare Krishna Prabhupada tree.
This is like Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Prabhupada in the purports what train to take to get to the place.
Yeah, we skipped here, They passed through the park on their way to St. Mark's Place, Greenwich Village, or the Lexington Avenue subway at Astor Place, or the IND subway at Houston and 2nd Avenue, or to catch an uptown bus on 1st Avenue, a downtown bus on 2nd, or a crosstown on 9th. All of these still remain. They've not changed. So we're running out of time. So, coming from the storefront, Kirtananda was now shaven-headed at Swamiji's request and dressed in loose, flowing canary yellow robes created extra sensation. Drivers pulled their cars over to have a look, their passengers leaning forward, agape at the outrageous dress and shaved head. As a group passed the store, people inside would poke each other to indicate the spectacle. People came to their windows of their tenements, taking in the Swami and his group as if a parade were passing by. The Puerto Rican tough guys especially couldn't restrain themselves from exaggerated reactions. "Hey, Buddha, you forgot to change your pajamas!" They made shrill screams as if imitating Indian war whoops they had heard in Hollywood westerns. "Hey, Arabs!" exclaimed one heckler, who began imitating what he thought was an Eastern dance. No one from the street knew anything about Krishna consciousness, nor even of Hindu culture and customs. To them, the Swamiji's entourage was just a bunch of crazy hippies showing off. But they didn't quite know what to make of the Swami. He was different. Nevertheless, they were suspicious. Anyway. Today, the ethnic neighbors just assumed that Prabhupada and his followers had come onto the street dressed in outlandish costumes as a joke, just to turn everything topsy-turvy and cause stares and howls. They felt their responses were only natural for any normal, respectable American slum dweller. So if you talk to older devotees who were there at this time, the going out on public Harinam Sankirtan was the culture and the consciousness of people was very, very different. So it took a lot more bravery and sincerity to go out in public dressed as a devotee than it is now, where the work has been done, the stage has been set, and not only is it tolerable, but it's very much advantageable to appear in public as a devotee. So it was quite an adventure before the group even reached the park. Swamiji, however, remained unaffected. So it grew bigger and bigger. There were like hundreds of people towards the end. Allen Ginsberg came by. Allen Ginsberg came. There was a reporter from the New York Times. That article came out with pictures the next day, October 10th. A reporter from the New York Times dropped by and asked Allen Ginsberg for an interview, but he refused, saying, "A man should not be disturbed while worshiping." The Times would have to wait. Tompkins Square Park was a hotbed of spiritual conflict in those days, so it was absolutely great. All of a sudden, in the midst of all the talk and drugs and theory, for some people to put their bodies, their singing, to break through the intellectual ice and come out with total bhakti, that was just really amazing. So general smiles and approval and encouragement as a beginning of some kind of real communal get-together in the park with a kind of serious underbass for exchange instead of just hot dog on the drums. It wasn't someone else's yoga retreat or silent peace vigil, but a pure chanting be-in of Prabhupada's own doing. It was a new wave, something everyone could take part in. The community seemed to be accepting it. It became so popular that even the ice cream vendor came over to make sales. Besides Prabhupada, a group of young blonde-haired boys, 5 or 6 years old, were just sitting around. Someone began burning frankincense on a glowing coal in a metal strainer, and the sweet fumes billowed among the flutists, drummers, and chanters. And Prabhupada's speech, a very nice picture is taken of that, immortalized. Prabhupada with his hands folded, standing by the large elm tree. If it was risky For a 71-year-old man to thump a drum and shout so loud, again, Prabhupada had no mridanga, it was just a bongo drum, small one. Those who go to the Prabhupada Palace of Gold in New Vrindavan can see it in a glass case on the right side of the altar there. He would take that risk for Krishna. It was too good to stop. He had come far from Vrindavan, survived the non-Krishna Yoga Society, waited all winter in obscurity on West 72nd Street. America had waited hundreds of years with no Krishna chanting. No Hare Krishna had come from Thoreau or Emerson's appreciations, though they had pored over English translations of the Gita and the Puranas. And no kirtan had come from Vivekananda's famous speech on behalf of Hinduism at the World Parliament of Religion in Chicago in 1893. So now he had finally had Krishna Bhakti going, flowing like the Ganges to the sea. It could not stop. In his heart, he felt the infinite will of Lord Chaitanya to deliver the fallen souls. He knew that what was the desire of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his own spiritual master, even though caste-conscious Brahmins in India would disapprove of his associating with such untouchables as these drug-mad American meat-eaters and their girlfriends. But Swamiji explained that he was in full accord with the scriptures. The Bhagavatam had clearly stated that Krishna consciousness should be delivered to all races. Everyone was a spiritual soul, and regardless of birth, they could be brought to the highest spiritual platform by chanting the holy name. Never mind whatever sinful things they were doing, these people were perfect candidates for Krishna consciousness. Tompkins Square Park was Krishna's plan. It was also part of the earth, and these people were members of the human race, and the chanting of Hare Krishna was the Dharma for the age. And when Prabhupada walked back to the temple, it's a very beautiful description. There was a crowd of people from the park standing on the sidewalk outside the storefront, young people waiting for him to arrive and unlock the door to matchless gifts. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shishi Radha Govinda ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. Hari Bol. Hare Krishna. Thank you.